Alright, so welcome to another problem-solving exercise. This prompt is pretty straightforward. We're simply told that white's advantage is indisputable, and we're asked what the best move is. On some level, I kind of dislike being told what the evaluation of the position is, but I absolutely agree here. White has an amazing position. I love these two bishops here. They just slice right through the position. And my first thought before anything else happens is simply that this dark squared bishop here would like to be on the A1 H8 diagonal. So I would really like to have that bishop lined up like so. And so my first thought is to play bishop E1. I don't know if it's as good as I want it to be, and it's not a forcing continuation on some level, but I really want that bishop on that diagonal and not currently on the H4 diagonal, H4 D8 diagonal, which doesn't seem to be all that relevant. So let's think about that for a moment. Let's say I play bishop E1 in this position. And I don't know what black plays, but let's say black passes, just for the moment. And let's say I play bishop to c3. Unfortunately, black still has his own dark squared bishop, and it would seem that his most logical move would be to play bishop g7. So I would play my bishop around to c3, and then he'll play his bishop over to g7 and block. That won't work for him, because if he does that, then I would just be able to play bishop takes e6, and after he takes back, I would take on g7, because I'll have the rook and the bishop lined up on g7. So after I get that bishop to c3, and again, I haven't given black a move in response to bishop e1, but after bishop e1 and then bishop c3, it looks like black would have to play king to g8, or maybe knight g7, but knight g7 is just terrible in principle, and in this case it looks like knight g7 just loses immediately to bishop f7. If the knight ever moves, then we're going to play that bishop over and fork the queen and the rook, and it looks like we're winning a very straightforward exchange there. So that looks very nice. Alright, so bishop gets to c3, the king slides over to g8. Now when the king slides to g8, obviously we've got a pin on the knight. That's appealing, but I don't know how to prosecute that advantage necessarily. I mean, I can play queen b3. Obviously, I can just play the queen to b3. But he's got the rook and the queen to defend, and it's not clear to me how I increase my pressure. So if I slide that bishop over to c3 and I plays king g8 and I play my queen to b3, I kind of don't know what my next move should be there. Although I have to say I feel so good about that position that I'm not too worried about what my next move is. I feel like it just looks so good. I can't believe that there's not a good follow-up. That simply queen b3 or taking on a7 or taking on b6, all of these moves to me feel more than sufficient. Okay, well, let's say this. I'm looking at the bishop remaneuver. I like the bishop remaneuver very much. I love having the two bishops on these diagonals. They're just tremendous. But let's look for something more concrete, because I can't see necessarily that after the bishop slides around and the king has to go to g8 that I have an immediate victory. So let's look for something else. First thought is, well, I don't have to put the bishop on the diagonal. I can immediately just play my queen to the diagonal, either to c3 or to b2. But now it does seem to me as though black is getting some more defensive opportunities, because he can play bishop g7. He'll gain time attacking my queen. My queen's going to have to move away, I think. That looks somewhat appealing for him. Let's double check that. Let's say queen to c3, and he meets it with bishop g7. And I guess the question is, can I play rook takes g7 and win by force? So he couldn't play queen takes because bishop f6 would pin the queen to the king. He would have to play knight takes, but knight takes allows that bishop f7 idea that we saw earlier. Whoops. Let's get that back. Alright. So, queen c3, bishop g7, rook takes g7, just looks like game over to me. I've won a piece, I think, with no real compensation for it. That looks tremendous. So after queen c3, just like with the bishop e1 coming around to c3, then he's going to have to play king g8. Again, he walks into the pin. I'm up a little bit more time here, and it just feels like a terrible bind. I'm wondering about just playing queen e5, queen c3, king g8, and then just queen e5. And I'm thinking at this point that maybe my next move is bishop e7, severing the defense of the knight by the rook. And that just looks brutal to me. Would that be brutal? Alright, let's say. Queen c3, king g8, queen goes to e5. And I pretend that black doesn't make a move. It's hard to see what black would play. I mean, maybe he takes a pawn on c5, but that is not a really helpful defensive move. And I go ahead and, well, I guess both moves feel strong to me. I'm just thinking about trying to break the queen and the rook from defending the knight, and I'm thinking maybe bishop f6 there. And it looks like the knight just goes to me, that the queen is no longer able to defend, and I just take the knight. That looks very straightforward to me. Yeah, I think that this is it. I think you just play queen c3, and then you go queen e5, and so queen c3, king g8. If he blocks on g7, then you're taking his bishop and it's winning. And if you play king g8, you play queen e5, and it looks to me like bishop f6 or bishop e7 should win extremely comfortably. That basically the knight on e6 is not holdable. I don't know that I missed anything. Let's say queen c3. I guess the one option I hadn't really considered is knight to g7, and just what we talked about earlier, again bishop f7. So I've spent too long thinking about this. Queen c3, I think, followed by queen e5 is, I think, just ending it. My immediate instinct to swing the bishop around to get it on the diagonal is unnecessary because the queen is at least as effective on the diagonal, and also the bishop on h4 is going to be useful in terms of severing the connection here, so that the queen and rook are no longer going to be able to defend that bishop, that knight on e6. Okay. Well, let's go see what the answer is. Well, my instincts were really good on this problem. My instinct within a split second of seeing this position is let's play the bishop around to the a1 h8 diagonal. Let's play bishop e1. And that's the correct solution. This was a game by Smyslov, and he did play bishop e1, bishop c3, and he won very nicely. So I liked that. I thought of it quickly, and then I rejected it for this queen c3 check move. Let's take a look here and see what queen c3 check leads to. If king g8, bishop f6 immediately is very strong according to the engine. In any case, black is getting crushed. Knight g7, bishop f7, like I said. And I thought that after bishop g7, I was going to be able to sacrifice the rook here. And now I realize the idiotic mistake that I made. I just caught it. So I was thinking after rook take g7 that knight take g7 was not possible because of the bishop going to f7, which is a deadly threat in many variations, but it's not a deadly threat if you play rook takes g7. So this is a very stupid mistake on my part, but it's also a relatively illustrative mistake. It's a common chess illusion, a common type of miscalculation to have sort of a shadow piece on the board when you just sacrificed a piece. And so in my head, I'm picturing the rook on d7 still defending f7, but of course if you sacrifice the rook, it's no longer there. And so this doesn't work at all. Instead, the sort of positional solution of simply bishop e1, as I initially suggested, is quite strong and is the best move in this position. Feel good about my instincts, feel pretty terrible about my calculations here in this particular moment.